about another conversation, and they're talking about another conversation. And why is that? Because they're trying to establish the methodology of learning, the epistemology of learning. What epistemology means? Theory of knowledge. So how do we learn? Well, the idea is we learn two different ways. Actually, several different ways. We have the pramanas, different ways of learning, as pointed out by Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, especially Jiva Goswami, different ways of learning. But the common way is we learn by seeing. Except, who here has seen a mirage in the desert or seen a mirage any place? Anybody seen a mirage? Okay. Where did you see a mirage, Advaita?
There was, well, I don't know if it counts, but it was on a highway of Nevada.
Oh yeah, you'll definitely you can get mirages out there because of the low humidity.
And also outside of Highland, there's a Black Rock Desert.
Yeah.
It appears like.
It does, and sometimes you'll see a whole oasis, but there's nothing but sand. So the eyes are not the perfect way of gaining knowledge, but they can gain some knowledge. We can get knowledge by inference. I see smoke, the most common example. I assume that somewhere there's a fire. And then we can get knowledge by the most reliable of all senses, which may not seem intuitive to everyone, but that's what we're going to get into here. And the most reliable of all senses is hearing. Now, the common example they'll be given in a purport later is if you want to know who your father is, there, at least before the advent of DNA, and this was written before DNA was around, so things have changed a little, but the example was given before DNA was discovered. If you want to know who your father is, there's one very good authority on that, your mother. Because she's going to know, who planted the seed for you. She's going to be the authority on it. There's stories in the Bhagavatam of sometimes there was someone who didn't know who their father was. And they were considered, can somebody name an example like that?
Karna.
Say again?
Karna.
Yeah. And there are others didn't know who their father was. And so they're brought up, many societies kind of shun that. But in the Bhagavatam, we find they can be very saintly persons too. There's no discrimination on birth, but that's a different matter. So there's trying to say that the best way is hear from someone who really knows. Now, what Gita verse says that? We have some Gita scholars here. Yes. I'll use a microphone. It's right in front of you.
Tat Tudvidhi Pranipatina said always, it said, approach a spiritual master, be submissive to him, and render service unto the spiritual master. And he can render the truth because he has the knowledge. He or she has seen it, has the knowledge. Yeah. So it's considered a primary method of knowledge is hearing, but it doesn't mean, and I can't emphasize this enough, doesn't mean we negate our own observation, our own inferences. These are called pramanas. There's a wonderful paper the Bhaktivedanta Institute has published by the brilliant Radhika Raman, also known as Ravi Gupta, professor, on what do you do when what you observe is different than what Shastra says? And that happens. What do you do? So he analyzes it. It doesn't mean we reject the observation either.
but it means we have to analyze it. We have to go deeper and figure it out. It doesn't mean we reject the Shastra. It means we get paradoxes. What's a paradox? Yes.
Can you give an example
An example?
of
What a paradox is?
yeah, of what you did, an observation is.
Use microphone.
I think he's asking for an example of an observation that's contrary to the Shastra.
See, not necessarily. A paradox means something seemingly contradictory, but it might not really be when we get deeper. Somebody have an example of a paradox?
A cup of water is half empty and half full.
Well, that's just an observation. That won't necessarily be paradoxical. Yes.
Are we still talking about paradox being different from observation versus the Shastra? Is that the Shastra?
Well, a paradox generally means something that seemingly is contradictory, but when you get deeper,
Okay.
it can make sense. Yes.
About the answer, she says the Shastras describe Himalayas being thousands of miles high.
Yeah.
But if you look at Himalayas, it's only like what, 6 miles high.
Yes.
So that's a contradiction. It's paradox. But we said what actually Shastras describe as Himalayas on a different realm we're not able to see. So that's
Yeah.
paradox. But if you go deeper, we understand that.
Here, we'll give you, that's one possibility. I'm even going to give a simpler one. I have it here. Oops, I lost it. We'll bring it back. Example of a paradox. Siri knows everything. Okay. Okay. And here's a famous example of a paradox. You ready? This statement is false. That's a paradox. It just doesn't quite, which is it? If this statement is false, then it's true. And if it's true, then the statement's false. Nothing makes sense. But paradoxes, you can resolve them. One famous example given in Shastra is this. It says the stool of an animal is contaminated. We all use a bathroom, we all shower. You're walking one time. I had a very dramatic example of this. Then we'll get into the verse. I was standing outside the New York temple. I was just a bhakta. And Prabhupada was about to walk down the steps to go to his car. I was thinking, should I offer obeisances? What would you have done? Well, I was thinking, but this is a dirty, filthy New York street. I can't offer obeisances, just do it in my mind. It was Prabhupada, I should offer obeisances. So the devil on one shoulder said, offer obeisances. The angel on one shoulder. And the devil said, don't. And I went back and forth. Yes, no, yes, no. Finally, the last moment, I either offered then or it's too late. And I said, no. And at that moment, I stepped in a big pile of dog doo. That exact moment. So, therefore, I learned a little lesson about dog doo, which is kind of really nasty stuff. Yet, when I lived in India, I cooked with cow dung. When I was a high school teacher in India, I lived very, very poverty stricken, basically. It was only a few hundred rupees a month, cook on coal dust or cow dung. And cow dung in all of the Brahminical kitchens is considered pure. You wash the walls and floors with it. Anybody from India had that experience of cooking and living? Cow dung. And scientists have studied cow dung as opposed to horse manure or others. It actually has antiseptic qualities. I mean, I don't recommend you eat it for lunch, but it does have antiseptic qualities. You can use it to clean things. At the temple in the Bhakti Center, they have the walls of the temple are actually made of dried cow dung because it's very purifying. So that's a paradox. all stool is contaminated, cow dung is pure. It seems paradoxical, but when you study it, you can understand it. Yeah, Dwaita, microphone.
In that line, Krishna is paradoxical too.
Yes, a very good point.
Very much so paradoxical.
Give an example.
We hear that from Brahma Samhita.
Yes.
He's Advaitam, but he's also one of a kind.
Yeah.
But he's also Ananta Rupam. He's also many forms. There's one and many. Which one is it?
And
he's also the youngest. Navayovanamcha, but he's also Adyam Purana. He's the oldest. So which one is it? Is it young or is it oldest?
excellent. So the way now, when we get paradoxes, it makes us go deeper. Now, of course, if we don't have put our good brains into it, a paradox will just make us confused. But the idea is to make us go deeper. The reason I'm giving this introduction is the name of the chapter is a conversation. In this conversation, they're trying to get deeper. What's an example of a very famous conversation that began in a really rough way? I mean, began with a heavy chastisement and it ended up getting very, very deep very quickly. Somebody think of a conversation like that? Yeah, the Gita, obviously. Obviously, the Gita. You know, Arjuna, will you stop being such a fool? Or to put it in the vernacular, dumb, you know what? So basically, that's what Krishna was saying. And then it got deeper and deeper. And many times, Arjuna says, Krishna, you said one thing, and you said another. Which is it? So the whole point is, every one of you is going to have some doubt about something. If you don't, you're not alive. There's no brain there. And all of you, you're here, so you have a brain. So you're going to have some doubts, some questions. So the key take home from this chapter is inquire, ask, discuss, go deeper. That is the essence of what's going on here. Not that we are mindless robots. There was this fellow, Ted Patrick. Who has heard of Ted Patrick? Anybody? You have? Anybody else heard of him? Of course, Gopal has. Ted Patrick was an interesting character. Then I really got to get into the verses. Ted Patrick was an interesting character. He, not very bright. I've met him. He used to get paid $5,000, which nowadays would be about $40,000, to kidnap devotees and deprogram them, convince them not to be devotees. He was rarely successful, but he was to kidnap people. And on a television interview, he was having a debate with Hridayananda Maharaj. You can imagine who won that debate. And he says, you people are mindless robots. And then he said something true. And you eat your food off wax paper on the floor, which is actually what we did in those days. So at that point, he did have a point there. I got to give him a little credit for something true. He would kidnap, and most devotees, 90% who got kidnapped would just escape, outsmart them. But he'd put them in a room and cut off their sika and take away, make them change their clothes and step on Bhagavatams. Yeah. Illegal? Yeah. He got arrested eventually. But in those days, the judges were sympathetic. There's one devotee here, Hridayananda Maharaj's first disciple in Gargamuni. He lives in Gainesville. At one time, it was Bhakta Greg, around 77-ish. Bhakta Greg was at the temple, and his stepfather pulls up in a car. And he says, Greg, I want to see you. And there are some other people in the car. So Greg comes over. The people jump out of the car and throw him in the back seat, hold him down and race off. And a young Bhakta was there with the Sankirtan band, saw it and just really sharp bucked, and he figured out what was going on. And he yelled, "Kidnapping, kidnapping," and raced off after him. And then I heard it, and I was in the temple. I ran out, jumped in my car, and raced off. So this Bhakta is chasing this car of kidnappers down through the kind of the ghetto of Houston at 100 miles an hour. And then a limousine pulls behind the kidnappers, and Ted Patrick is in there with his thugs. And then the cops, and then the devotee in the Sankirtan van is very clever. He does one of these quick turns and cuts in front of the kidnapper's car and blocks him off. So the kidnapper's car screeches to a halt, and he gets out of the car and starts banging on it, "Let my friend go." And the cops pull up and they point a gun at him. "What are you doing?" He says, "They're kidnapping." So then the cop says, "Everyone out of the car, everyone hands up." And then Ted Patrick gets out of the car, and then a few of us pull up, and Ted and Gargamuni was sharp. And he'd never seen Ted Patrick, but Ted Patrick had written a book, "Let My Children Go," or something like that. And he saw the book in the back of the car, and he realized that this was Ted Patrick. So Ted Patrick goes to the cops. "We have a conservatorship. He's going to be arrested." Not conservatorship. He's now under custody of his mother. And Gargamuni was sharp, looked at it, he says, "That's not a conservatorship. It's not signed by a judge. It's a proposal to a judge. It has no legal thing." So then the cops are trying to convince him, "Please go with this nice people." And as we walk up to the cops, they tell us to get away. So I go into a neighbor's house before cell phones, and I call up the police and I say, "There's a kidnapping going on. You better send a captain." So they send a police captain out because they can't figure out what's going on. They know there's a police call from the radio, and then there's a kidnapping they can't figure out. So then the captain shows up and realizes the law is a law. Gargamuni's, over 21, he can do whatever he likes. So he went away with us. So that was Ted Patrick, the kidnapper. He rarely succeeded. But these things were going on in those days because, they were considered, rescuing us from a cult. I know at least half a dozen devotees were kidnapped. The Romapad Swami, you all know Romapad Swami? He used to, when somebody from New York Temple got kidnapped at an apartment, mine was the emergency phone number. So he'd hang out at my apartment till they called and we'd rescue him. Those were adventurous days. So I tell this because what Ted Patrick's technique was, he would try to show all the hypocrisy, all the errors, all the things that didn't make sense, and try to get people to leave. He would try to show the paradoxes, but not being very intelligent. I'd say 9 out of 10 devotees he got would outwit him pretty quickly. And frankly, he wasn't very bright. So we should do some verses maybe today. Why not? Text one, we actually have 15 verses, which I'm not going to read all of, just trying to give a context. And we have, we'll start here. We'll start with this English. Sri Sanika inquired, "O Sutta, after the earth was again situated in orbit, what does Svaya Bhuvamanu do to show the path of liberation to persons who were to take birth later on?" Shanika Rishi inquired about Vidura, who was a great devotee and friend of Lord Krishna, who gave up the company of his elder brother. Who was his elder brother? Dhritarashtra. Because the latter, along with his son, played tricks against the desires of the Lord. In other words, there were those who read the Mahabharata know the story well. Vidura was born from the body of Vedavyas and was not less than he. Thus, he accepted the lotus feet of Krishna wholeheartedly and was attached to his devotees. And it talks about how Vidura was purified by wandering around to holy places. I mean, he was born purified, but he still set the example and purified himself. And then Shanika inquired, what was the conversation between Vora and Maitreya? And And Shanika says there must have been many narrations of the pastimes of the Lord. The hearing of such narrations is exactly like taking shelter, like bathing in the water of the Ganges, or can free one from all sinful reactions. And so Sutta Goswami said, "Oh, good fortune, please narrate the activities of the Lord, which were all magnanimous and worth glorifying. What sort of devotees can be satiated by hearing the nectarian activities of the Lord?" We're getting close to our verse. I'm being asked to speak by the great sage Namisharanya, the son of Ramaharshana. Sutta Goswami, whose mind was absorbed in the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, said, "Please hear what I shall now speak." In other words, listen carefully. This is going to be really important, and it is. Sutta said, "Vidura, the descendant of Bharata, was delighted to hear the story of the Lord, having assumed by his own divine potency the form of a boar, had enacted the sport of lifting the earth and the bottom of the ocean and indifferently killing the demon Hiranyaksha. Vidura then spoke to the sage as follows, and this is the focus verse for today. Vidura said, "Since you know of matters inconceivable to us, tell me, O holy sage, what did Brahma do to create living beings after evolving the Prajapatis, the progenitors of living beings? How did the Prajapatis, the progenitors, creators, create according to the instructions of Brahma, and how did they evolve this manifested universe? Did they evolve the creation in conjunction with their respective wives? Did they remain independent in their actions?" Remember, Krishna, he can actually produce children by just glancing, not that he has to procreate in the way we all do. Just glancing creates. Brahma would glance and create. It's quite mystical. But we experienced that. The first time I tried offering prasadam, I said, "What a weird ritual." That's a strange ritual, it seemed to me. Just put on a plate and think a statue's got to have a dinner. Anybody ever, that seems strange to anybody? Odd thing here. And I tried it, and it worked. I could feel the difference. It was prasad. It was very mystical. Okay, these things happen so the Lord can eat with his eyes. It actually happens. I think Maharaj shared the story one time. I was on the roof of the Bombay temple. Not the temple, there was no temple, just the buildings. There was no buildings. They just bought the land in Bombay. And I was staying there. I wasn't didn't identify as a devotee, but I was deeply inquiring. I was on the roof of the building, and there was no place to live. We just lived like in a little mosquito nets on the roof, and can't even describe the facility. It was probably the most austere thing I've ever been to. If you read Giriraj Swami's book, "I'll Build You a Temple," it's all described there in detail. And so it's Mangal Artik. So since Mangal Artik's on the roof of the buildings, you have no choice but to attend. So that's nice. So the Mangal Artik, like that, Samsara Dava. And then after that, the weirdest thing happened. They took out a plant. They started dancing around a plant. I've never seen such a thing in my life. You just imagine dancing around a plant. This is really weird. I wonder what that's about. And I'm watching it, and I wasn't objecting to it, just trying to wrap my head around it. What's going on? And Sarabi Swami comes to me and says, "What are you doing?" Well, my answer was, "What are you doing? I can't figure this one out." And he then says to me, "You are like the person who's licking a jar of honey. You'll never taste it. Dance." I said, "You want me to walk around a plant?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "Okay." So I started dancing Yani, Kani, Chapapani around the plant. And it was a totally mystical experience. Actually, I still remember this moment. So deeply mystical. So sometimes we just have to try it to understand it. We got another few verses. And I think I'm going to skip this for now because it goes to a different subject. So we're going to get back to verse 9. Viduru vacha prajapati pati sritva praja sarge prajapatim kim arabata me brahman prabhu avyata marga hit. So significant here is the word of yata, of yata, mirgavit, one who knows that which is beyond our perception. To know matters beyond one's perception, one has to learn from superior authority in a line of disciple succession. Just to know who is our father, we discussed before. We have to understand everything beyond our perception from the authority who actually knows. The first of Yakta, Marga, Vid, or authority is Brahma, and the next is Narada. Maitreya belongs to this. He's also of Yakta, Marga, Vid. Anyone in the bona fide line is of Yakta, Marga, Vid, a personality who knows what's beyond ordinary perception. Now I'm going to ask you a difficult question. Who in this room right now is of Yakta Marga Vid? Who? Well, who that is in the room breathing? Prabhupada is here through his instruction, we agree. Who knows what is beyond our perception? Yes.
Dvaita.
Dvaita, okay. And who else?
Kalindi.
Okay.
Nartana.
Okay. I contend every last one of you. Yes, every last one of you, without any doubt, because all of you have experienced things beyond just sense perception. Otherwise, you're not sitting here. So every one of you, without exception, is of Yakta Marga Vid, one who knows what's beyond our perception. That's a heavy burden to have. Imagine that. You actually know what's beyond perception. That's like, wow. We can talk a lot about that. But we're going to go cue up my video. We're talking about the universe here. And I'm going to show a short clip by Brian Cox. He's a very famous, I think, astrophysicist or physicist, I forgot which, very famous guy. He's actually appeared, he's spoken at a BI function already. Don't necessarily agree with all his conclusions, or maybe any of his, anyway, at least some of his conclusions. But he's intelligent, a nice guy. And we're talking about how inconceivable, since you know of matters inconceivable to us, tell me, oh holy sage, what did Brahma do to create living beings? We're talking about inconceivable. So I wanted to show you a clip about the universe. This is the latest information from the Webb telescope. Go for it.
Can you explain the scale of the universe? No. So you can give the numbers. The nearest large galaxy, Andromeda, is about 2 million light years away, which means light traveling at 300,000 kilometers per second. From our point of view, it takes 2 million years to travel from Andromeda galaxy to us. So if you go away from the city lights and a clear sky, and when there's no moon particularly, you'll be able to see Andromeda. You've got some binoculars, and it's worth looking at because the light entering your eye began its journey 2 million years ago, which is before we evolved. That gives you a sense, and you can see that. You can just about see it with the naked eye because it's big. It's a big galaxy, about a trillion stars. Although it's very faint, it's bigger than a full moon on the sky. So it's a big thing. I think that's the best explanation of the scale because you can just about, I think, get your head around that. So that's the nearest galaxy. And many of the galaxies we can see in photographs, those things are so far away that the light began its journey before the Earth formed. But that's incomprehensible. So the answer is I can't explain the true scale of the universe. Picture. Can you explain this step?
Okay. And he's talking about the trillions of stars in the Milky Way galaxy and the other galaxies, and there are trillions of galaxies. In other words, it's very vast. And I'm sharing this information because there's an amazing, awesome universe which we'll never quite understand. Now, there's a very famous example of this that occurs, I think, during the month of Damodar. This occurred, a very famous example in which Mother Yasoda saw this. What's the example?
Oh, Krishna was eating dirt.
Krishna's eating dirt. She looked in Krishna's mouth and saw just what I showed you here. Millions of galaxies in the universe is way beyond our comprehension, way, way beyond. Saw all that and said, oh my gosh. There's another famous example in the Gita. Who knows that example? Yes. Universal form. Krishna revealed this universal form, and it was so ferocious. Arjuna said, enough, I'll take your two-arm form, enough. So, I mean, just seeing millions of universes and millions of planets and millions of demigods, everything. So why do I show this video? Because the modern word, I don't understand how this word is used because it's a generational thing. But the modern word I hear is awesome. Like, you know, somebody, I went to see the doctor and they said, well, what medicine are you taking? So I said, well, I'm taking this pill and that. And the nurse goes, awesome. How does that fit? I don't see it. Awesome's become, it doesn't mean awesome anymore. I don't know what it means now, but there really is a word awesome. And this is awesome. And the universal form is awesome. And what we see in Mother Yasoda's mouth is awesome. And when I dance around Tulsi and I have that mystical experience, that's awesome. There really is awesome, even though right now the word has become hackneyed in ways that I cannot quite understand. I guess that's awesome too somehow, but I don't understand it. Anyway,
There's new words nowadays.
there are. I'm dating myself. Yeah, okay. I'm still shocked. I mean, I'm giving a list of medicines and the nurse goes, awesome. What was awesome about it? Gotta take some pills. Okay.
Good thing she didn't say gas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is. Anyway, these things happen. Okay. So, since you know the nature of matters inconceivable, tell us, what did Brahma do to create living entities after evolving the Prajapatis? Now, one of the areas that we study deeply in the Bhaktivedanta Institute is cosmogenesis. Does anybody know what the word cosmogenesis means? Anybody know that word? You might not.
The origin of the universe.
Yeah, how do things begin? Genesis,
Yes.
beginning, cosmos, universe, cosmogenesis. How did how do things happen? And the modern theories, the theory, of course, you all heard of the Big Bang. You may not know, this thing needs to be turned up, okay. You may not know that the Big Bang, that term was invented by a priest as a joke. Priest was an astronomer. He was talking about how the universe happened, and he jokingly said it must have been a Big Bang. I mean, it was really a joke. And then it kind of stuck, and that's where it came from. You can look up this history, it's well known. So anyway, so it's referred to as the Big Bang. But the question is, the modern theory of cosmology has evolved. First, how do you get something from nothing? Doesn't make sense. So the modern theory that's now being quite accepted by people like Sir Roger Penrose, the Nobel laureate, and other quite well-known theoreticians, is that the universe is cyclic. That before the current creation, there was some quiet period, and there was a prior creation, and it's cyclic. Anybody here ever read anything about cyclic universes? Yes.
Bhagavad Gita chapter 9, Krishna said that when Brahma's days end, the whole universe, it collides within itself or collapses within itself, and then he repeats the process all over again. And then in Srimad Bhagavatam, third canto, so this, I think the first part is talking about the beginning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You've used your time as a guest of the government to study very well. I appreciate that. You used that time well. Very good. Well done. Very well done. The good use of that time. If others want to get an opportunity like that, you can.
I don't recommend.
Oh, okay. I just think you could guide them how to make that happen. Okay.
We have a couple of cells up there.
Yeah. Okay. No, but very good. I can see you've been studying. I really appreciate that. Very, very good. I'm sure glad you're here. So the point is that the cyclic universe is actually found in the Bhagavatam. First, the Big Bang came from nothing. Realize you don't get anything from nothing. So now the more modern theory is it's cyclic. Now the big missing link is which comes first, matter or consciousness? And the beginning of the universe has numbers associated with it. And if these numbers were off in the 20th decimal place, according to mathematical theory, the universe doesn't work. These numbers are the cosmic constants. So there are terms, we don't need to go into detail, the Planck constant, the Planck distance, there are these, yeah, they're derived, they're involved with quantum mechanics. We don't need to go into detail on that, but if they were off a little, it didn't work. But where does math come from? Has anybody walked down the street and seen 2 + 2 = 4? You don't see it. It's a method, it's a concept of the mind. So if there are numbers and there are specific constants, then where do they come from? Well, numbers come from the mind. So the mind must perceive the universe, which is the Bhagavatam's version. So what I'm trying to say here is a very important factor. You know, I run the Bhaktivedanta Institute, the science arm of ISKCON. And in it, there's this two-way street we deal with, a very important two-way street. Studying ancient wisdom, such as time dilation. Anybody know what time dilation is? Yeah, this, yes, a microphone.
As you get closer to Brahma, the time dilates.
Yes, and if you go to the International Space Station and you're wearing an atomic watch, and your twin on Earth is wearing an atomic watch, these are the most accurate watches there are. They exist. And a little more expensive than my Apple Watch, but they exist. If a year later, your twin comes back, his watch will be a second slower than yours. Just moving at that speed around the Earth, 17,000 miles an hour. This is Einstein's theory of relativity. Time moves at a different rate. This is proven. I mean, every GPS satellite, which we're using on our cell phones and all the time, has to be calibrated because it's moving around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour. And therefore, the time it keeps is different than the time on Earth. So it has to be recalibrated constantly. And they recalibrate it against a fixed atomic clock on Earth. And the way GPS works is they calculate the travel time to 3 different satellites, and those who know some geometry, by triangulation, you can get your location. And so, but that requires at the clock on Earth and the clock at the satellites to be the same, and they have to be adjusted regularly. If they're not adjusted, then Sometimes that happens. It gets off and your GPS takes you to the wrong place. That could be one of the reasons why the adjustment didn't work.
That's where the glitches.
That it does come from that. It really does. So the point I'm making here is that the time dilation is one example. Cyclic universe is another example. There are many examples of science that if we study modern science, it actually helps us understand the Bhagavatam. Because these stories of traveling and time is different, and who was it that went? I get the names mixed up for a moment. Went off, and when he came back, he went to see Brahma, and when he came back, generations had passed, many generations, and anybody who would remember him, anybody who would remember, somebody who would remember, somebody who would remember, somebody who would remember him was all long dead. But for him, it was just a short time. This time dilation is exactly found in modern physics, and it's in the Bhagavatam. So modern physics helps me understand the Bhagavatam, and the Bhagavatam helps me understand modern physics. It's a two-way street. And to me, as a scientist, this really increases my faith many times over in the Bhagavatam, and it helps me understand a lot of scientific things. It also tells me the most important thing, and that's what I don't know, because there's so much that we don't know. And I'll take an example of evolutionary biology. The more we study the cells, the less we know. You talk to any microbiologist, they will all tell you the same thing. The more we study the cells, the more we can't understand it. They're so much more complicated than we thought. We thought it was simple. There was mitochondria, cell walls, some protoplasm. It's so much more complicated. So the more we know, the less we know. And therefore, at some point, if we want to look at the big picture, we approach some authoritative source. And Alex, you had a question?
I wanted to agree and share that also, like when studying the Bhagavatam, it brought me to quantum mechanics. I was studying the Feynman lectures. I have them upstairs because Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 3, Part 1, Chapter 11 brought me to the atom. And then I was like, well, what's an atom? And then it brought me to light. And I was like, well, everything beyond subatomic nature is light, and particles or waves, they move like waves. And that's why sometimes I just zone out and I be looking at everything move, because Krishna's moving everything is Prakriti. And you're so right, the Bhagavatam is explaining that.
It's a deep realization. In quantum physics, there's the most famous double slit experiment, which I actually did at the BI because I want to see it myself, in which if you take two slits and you shoot a bunch like a gun that shoots ping pong balls through the slits, and they're going to make a pattern on the wall, the opposite slits of two lines. And then if you get smaller and smaller, and you start shooting electrons or even photons through it, one at a time, just one photon at a time. Photons is the smallest unit of light.
Superposition.
Yeah, it will form, instead of two patterns, will form what they call an interference pattern. So light here is acting like a wave, just like if you throw two pebbles in a pond, and it will create these patterns, and the patterns will interfere with each other. And where the troughs meet, it will get stronger. Where a trough meets a wave, it cancels out. Same thing happens with light. And so you get this interference pattern. But if you observe a particular photon, which slit it went through, there's a mechanism to do that, then it breaks down and just forms two lines, and it no longer forms an interference pattern. Now, I'm giving the essence of one of the most critical experiments in physics that should take an hour to explain. I'm doing it in 30 seconds. But the point of it is, it's extremely paradoxical. And to this day, no physicist has resolved that paradox.
Oh, and
Yes, Advaita.
Thank you, Guru. Thank you very much for
Yeah.
thought-provoking class. You just mentioned another paradox. The more we know, the less we know.
Yes, that is a paradox. Very well said.
And in that light, once I heard a reporter was asking Prabhupada, so if you, what was the word?
Yeah, thank you.
You mentioned that all of us are that. If you're a guru, spiritual master, and you know everything, so you ask him, so how many windows are there in an entire state looking?
Yeah.
It was challenging like that. And so it's really interesting how Prabhupada responded to that.
What do you say?
He said, and that's how he started the lecture. That's interesting. He said, how many drops of water are in a mirage?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Prabhupada just turned, very expertless, he very often does, he turned the table back on a reporter by counter question.
Yeah,
Yes, there's information, and then there's also this.
there is. Sometimes Prabhupada would respond kind of funny to reporters. One reporter, a lady reporter, came in a challenging mood, goes, "Why do you shave your head?" And Prabhupada goes, "Why do you shave your legs? Better warm legs and cool, better warm legs and cool head." As Alex.
And I wanted to add the verse in Shukla Krishna Jagatahiyate. He said, there's two ways of leaving this world, one in light and one in darkness. When you leave in light, you never come back. When you leave in darkness, you come back. So my question is light the true reality in atomic matter, darkness?
I think we're using metaphors here. So, we say that Krishna has three energies: superior energy, marginal energy, and material energy. And we're marginal. We can identify with either. So our illusion is to identify with matter, not with a higher energy. But we have that choice. Because if you don't have the choice, there's no free will. If there's no free will, there is no such thing as love and beauty. If we study in the Christian tradition, let's say Ansel, the brilliant philosopher, who defined God as that who has no greater qualities, the greatest. There cannot be anybody greater. Is derived from some Aristotelian view. But they only had two qualities of God: omniscient and omnipotent, can do everything and knows everything. And some say omnibenevolent, all good. But at least the two. How many qualities do we have for God? Well, but there's 6 that are given. All beautiful, all knowledge, all wealth. Yeah. So the qualities of God that are found in the Bhagavatam exceed what we find in the traditional Christian philosophy. It's not saying the Christian philosophy is wrong. It's saying it's incomplete. So if we once we understand that God is all beautiful, as an example, then that makes God all attractive. What's a name for God that means all attractive? Krishna. So God's all attractive. So because God is lovable, God's a person. The big dispute philosophically, we're over time, so this will be for another day. The big dispute, the big argument you have around the world, find it in the Jewish tradition, Maimonides, you find it in the Christian tradition, you'll find it certainly in the Indian tradition. If God has a body, doesn't that make him material? That's the big argument. If God has a body, doesn't material, because it's a lack of understanding of that there is such thing as a spiritual body. But that will be for another day, another class, another time. With that, we're over time, so we'll end here. Thank you very much. Been a nice audience. Nice to see you all. Have a blessed day and distribute a lot of prasadam. Hare Krishna.